It can take weeks to travel across the United States as you watch it change from place to place. It can be hot or cold, dry and barren, or humid and lush. Imagine if you could do all of that in just 8 hours.
Nothing says variety more than the landscape and nature of Israel. I'm on a journey of discovery to see the beauty of the Holy Land as I explore from border to border of this amazing place. Watching rocks turn from white to red to brown to black and back again makes this country a geological marvel. I've had the opportunity to travel all over this country in the past 15 years of coming here, and I've seen many of the beautiful sights that can be found in this historical setting. But I haven't thought much about the landscape and topography that makes this land such a collage of form and beauty. Our first stop starts in the southernmost tip of Israel, the city of Eilat. This might not look like much of a national park, but once you go beneath the surface, that's when things really shine. People fly from across the globe to come visit the Red Sea, which has one of the most densely populated coral reefs in the world and is renowned for its variety of fish species. I met up with Shai Nahon, ecological tour guide and native to the south of Israel.
This is where all the countries meet. We got Egypt over there. Saudi Arabia is basically over there. And a good
Saudi Arabia right over there.
Yeah, and a good day you can see the flag. You can't see it right now. And over there we got Jordan.
What does Eilat mean to Israel?
It was a dream from David Ben-Gurion, the establishment of the country. He really wanted to have this particular area as an exit way towards the seas, towards the eastern seas. So we have exits to water. We're very fortunate in that respect. We have exits to water with the Mediterranean. This is the only one we got towards the eastern, southern portions of the world.
So it's of strategic importance for Israel. How about to have a little bit of fun?
We can actually see this area here. This is a diving spot.
Yeah.
There's a diving spot over there. There's a diving spot over there. There's a reef that goes underneath the water here. People come here to snorkel, to drive around. It's just a beautiful area. I mean, there's a beautiful reef underwater here, and they're snorkeling along the reef. And this is one of the most beautiful reefs in this particular area of the world. There's a very high level of fish and variety of species that you can actually see while diving around. The reef is growing rather than shrinking. Has to do a lot with the conservation work that Israel has done towards making sure that the reef stays here.
A lot of Israelis come on vacation here?
A lot of Israelis come on vacation here. We saw them yesterday walking around, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely still worth it. Israelis coming into vacation here for sure. Tourists are landing and coming to vacation in Israel as well, specifically to Eilat, more and more of the time because of the new airport that was built here.
So Shai, we're sitting here, the border with Egypt, you said, is just right there. And then you told me that that's Saudi Arabia over there, Jordan over there, Israel back here. What's the relationship like between these countries?
It was a work in progress, you know. Over time, it got better and better. Nowadays, it's really well. I mean, Israel has a peace agreement with Egypt since the 80s and with Jordan since 1994. Jordan, the peace is warmer, if you want, than from Egypt. But still, it's warm enough that Israelis feel comfortable traveling into Jordan, traveling into Egypt. You actually see the entire coastline is parked with cars of Israelis that went into the Sinai Peninsula. And Israelis go to Jordan all the time. Saudi Arabia, officially Israel doesn't have any relations with, but Saudi Arabia has been shifting slowly towards Israel over time. Yeah, 40, 50 years ago, I don't think anybody was thinking this would be a possibility. Nowadays, we're enjoying peace in this area. It's really cool.
That's the prayer for all of the borders, hopefully someday, right?
One day.
Yeah.
Shai wanted to take me to the Negev, Israel's largest desert, to see the geological marvels of the Ramon crater.
This is Machtesh Ramon, can be seen from space. The largest Machtesh erosion crater in the world, one of 7 within the perimeter of Israel, one of 9 in total. anywhere else in the world. It doesn't exist. It only exists in Israel and the Sinai Peninsula. 3 of them are large enough for you to drive through, like we just did.
Yes.
2 of them are large enough for you to walk in, and the other 2, or 4, depending which one you ask, are not even large enough for you to walk in. You can walk over.
What's amazing is that you see all the different colors here. You've got black, you've got blue, you've got red.
Most of the colors we're looking at, if they are red, purple, yellow, green, white, and so forth and so on, those are sandstone. There's an area here called the Carpentry where you can see hexagon sticks. That's boiled rock that really cooled off really quickly, so it formed these hexagons. A lot of different really cool geological phenomena. In Eilat, where we just left, Israel National Trail starts there. And everyone who starts hiking from there is going to pass through here at some point. So as they're hiking, they're going to make it through this really harsh climate that we see around us. They're going to go north through Mitzpe Ramon and continue towards the northern portions of the country.
And the Israel National Trail is basically, you could go from the bottom of the country to the top of the country.
Most people would start up north and hike it down because it's easy to get acclimated to. All in all, it goes from the very south of the country to the very north of the country.
And this is part of it.
And this is definitely part of it. Originally, this valley was known as Wadi Ruman, translates as the Valley of the Romans. Nowadays, we call it Ramon Crater, or the Machtesh Ramon area, named after it. But this was part of the spice route, the traditional spice route of the Nabatean people, which are the original Bedouins, right? The ones that used to travel through with the spices. And they had these amazing techniques to find water in the desert. They would hide water in the desert. They would create these small canals that would move water from miles away, concentrating this to a massive hole in the ground. And they knew how to navigate the desert. Most people wouldn't be able to do this. For the Israeli National Trail, we actually moved a pipeline all the way into the Machtesh so that people can fill up the water bottles.
Modern technology, a little different.
Otherwise, people wouldn't be able to do this. To hike this as part of the Israel National Trail, you have to hike through this part of the desert about 3 to 4 days.
It's here in the heat of the desert sun that you go from real to unreal. Finding comfort in the sight of the blue and beautiful body of water on the edge of the desert sand. But not all water sources are there to drink. This is the Dead Sea, whose name alone is enough to ward off the unsuspecting thirsty traveler. This is also the lowest habitable place on Earth, situated more than 400 yards below sea level.
Well, the Dead Sea is the lowest place in the world. It's about 1,300 feet below sea level. And it happens to be the border between Israel and Jordan. Now, the depth of the Dead Sea goes approximately another 1,300 feet below what you see. So it's actually fairly deep. Now, right here, in some of its areas. And due to the depth of this, we have a lot of different minerals that come from the Dead Sea. So we harvest a lot of them. The most common, of course, is salt. It's 37.6% salt, and it's one of the saltiest bodies of water in the world, which means that automatically, because of the salt, the buoyancy is different, and people can float in it. You know, there's historical documents that mention the Nabateans that were in Jordan. They used to sail on this from side to side and used to harvest minerals from this. They actually used to gather natural asphalt that would pop up. They would take it to Egypt and they would sell it to the Pharaonites for the embalming process. Israel still does that, not the asphalt and not to the Egyptians for the embalming process, but we still harvest the minerals and we actually sell it all over the world. There's billions of dollars that are being made every year from this production of fertilizers, Dead Sea products. Even magnesium is harvested here. In addition, this has become a very interesting spot for tourism. Starting in the 70s, it became a very touristy destination for people mainly from Eastern Europe who were experiencing some sort of vitamin D deficiency. They used to come here to get more sun exposure. Over time, they became famous all over the world for its spa treatments.
So how is it so salty? What makes it so salty? What makes it so different than, say, the Sea of Galilee, which is just up a few hours north of here?
Fantastic question. Sea of Galilee has the Jordan River flowing into it and flowing out of it, which means that the same amount of salt is coming in as it's coming out. This body of water is a closed body of water. The Jordan River flows into it from the northern portion and nothing flows out
no outlet.
south. And because of the immense heat here, the evaporation level is so high, over thousands of years, the salt has accumulated here.
What happens when you get in, when you've got just like a little cut on you or something like that?
It's very pleasant, obviously. Yes.
Very pleasant.
Very pleasant,
Just salt in an open wound.
Yes, very pleasant.
But it does have healing qualities.
Yes, and so if you go in with any sort of an open cut, this will burn a lot. but it will heal. So if you remember when we were in Eilat, we mentioned the Red Sea cuts into Israel right at the Great Rift Valley. And the Great Rift Valley in Israel is actually called the Jordan Valley. This is part of it. It goes all the way from Eilat and continues very much north, connects with the Sea of Galilee in northern. And it's basically a separation between two tectonic plates. You got Jordan over here, Israel over here, and they're splitting apart over time.
It's like a rift. It's an actual, I mean, that's
it's literally a rift
valley, so it's
which
a rift.
is why it's so deep. It's opening up and it's actually getting deeper over time, which is why we see this unique phenomena. But it created a land bridge that connects Europe and Africa. And so we have migration of birds passing through here all the time. Twice a year, actually, they migrate south and then they migrate north, and you have about 400 million to 500 million birds passing through Israel on a yearly basis. So this is basically the passing point for birds, and has been the passing point for people for thousands of years.
The journey through the desert typically takes around 3 weeks to complete. Once doing so, the journey can turn green very fast. I decided to walk the trail, joined by Aryeh Green, an amateur hiker who was inspired to walk the whole trail at the age of 51.
As the name implies, it's called the Israel National Trail, and it's basically 750 miles from the tip of the country in the south, in Eilat on the Dead Sea, to where the border with Lebanon is in the north. And it goes all through the Negev desert, and then here up through this part of the Jerusalem hills, and then down to the coastal plain, and then up to the Galilee.
Wow, all the way up. Is this the marker for it? Is this the sign?
This is actually a sign of this particular trail, because the Israel Trail is made up of a whole bunch of different trails, and then some of them that are only part of the Israel Trail. But no, this sign, which is just black and white, is for this particular section. But here's a sign. It's a little bit faded, but this is the Israel Trail sign. It has the white for the snow in the north on it, and the kind of red or bronze for the desert in the south, and in the middle blue for Israel or the sea, the Mediterranean Sea or the Sea of Galilee or what have you.
How amazing.
Yeah.
So, Aryeh, you wrote a book. I actually have a book here. It's called My Israel Trail.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write this book? Because if I understand correctly, you walked the Israel Trail at age 51.
51.
What was the inspiration?
It's true. It's usually the 21-year-old crowd that hikes the trail. I mean, as I said, it's almost 1,000 miles long, and it took me 2 months, and it was definitely not, it was not kind of the normal thing for me to do. I'm not a trekker. I mean, I do, as I was saying, you know, day hikes or overnights, what have you. But so what was the impetus?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had a divorce. Kind of came out of nowhere. It was a big surprise, and it was a really difficult period in my life, and a lot of suffering, a lot of pain. As a result of the divorce, we kind of threw my life out of whack, and had to figure out a way to get back on track.
To recenter, right?
That's right.
So how did you prepare to go on this hike on the Israel Trail? What did you have to do?
Well, as I said, I've done a lot of hiking also here in Israel over the years, and I bike about twice a week here in the Jerusalem hills. So I was in decent shape. There was a lot, I think, of psychological preparation. There was a lot of logistical stuff of, you know, I took a leave of absence from my work, and my daughter was living at home, so she could at least, you know, take care of the house, but I had to get supplies together. I did take one kind of test walk of 15 miles or so with rocks in my backpack, because the backpack was a 50-pound pack. So I wanted to make sure that I could do that, you know, without, so.
When you're on the Israel Trail, Israel's such a diverse place when it comes to its topography and its geography. It's so diverse. You can go from one end to the other and see totally different things.
Well, the easiest way, I mean, I think, Scott, for most of us as Americans to think of the trail is think of it like kind of California. It's got desert in the south.
Yeah.
It's got the sea to the west.
That's a good point.
It's got hills to the east, and it's got forests and mountains to the north. It's a very small California.
Yeah, right.
But it's really kind of fascinating that within the context of a very, very short, I mean, okay, it was 2 months and it's almost 1,000 miles, but short in the context of a brief period of time that you can literally cross from desert and different kinds of deserts, and then up through like the Atir forest where you begin to see some greenery, and then here into the Jerusalem hills where you've got these pine forests, and then out to the coast where you've got, you're walking along the sea between Tel Aviv, Herzliya, and Caesarea, and then heading up into what are basically the hills or mountains of the Galilee, where you've got forests and streams. It really is a very, I think, unusual combination of different kind of geographies within a very, very small country. It's true. There are some kids now walking along the trail coming up to us, which shows you how much the trail is used by Israelis of every age at every time.
Yeah.
Like this group of kids, many Israelis walk stages of the trail throughout the year. What's really shocking is to see the enthusiasm for nature among the younger generation. I've continued my way through the beauty of the coast and past the lushness of the Galilee to the very top of the country. This is the Golan, the north of Israel, and another very different place. This is where the borders of Israel, Syria, and Lebanon connect, all in a most unlikely place, Mount Hermon. Israel's tallest mountain and world-class ski resort, standing at more than 7,000 feet. I'm with Ilan Shulman, a Golan native and ex-army paratrooper. His kibbutz, which is another name in Israel for small community, is located just a stone's throw from the border of neighboring Syria. His passion for the landscape is often overshadowed by the realities facing the security of the area.
So I will say, first of all, I'm a kibbutznik. I live in the kibbutz here in Marom Golan, which is the first community established on the Golan Heights after the Six-Day War. And I joined the army as most of the Israelis, served there for the paratroopers 7 years, got released because of an injury. I got shot in my legs during the Second Intifada in Nablus. The rehabilitation brought me to understand that I can do nothing physical. I started my studies in Haifa University of Middle East Studies in Islam. Then in 2011, the civil war in Syria began, and we started to hear explosions over the backyard of the kibbutz. And I realized that as much as I thought I knew, I had no idea. I live here since it's beautiful. That's the main reason. Beautiful in terms of the landscape here. First of all, it's quiet. Second, we have no stoplights in the Golan, so no traffic jams.
A little less commercialized.
No doubt. Green for almost half of the year. We have gorgeous spring here. Amazing fall when the color is starting to change. This is now the very beginning of it. Well, I think to live in a place that you see tourists coming, and not necessarily from abroad, but Israelis to enjoy, makes you to appreciate the place much more.
Someone living in Tel Aviv who's tired of sort of the everyday life, the busyness of everything, they can come 2.5, 3 hours away, and they can be in the Golan Heights and be in a quiet place.
Here, on the one hand, we see here the farming land of the kibbutz, and now we have our farmers picking apples. Right over the orchards, and we're going to see how close things are. We're talking about several yards from the farming land of the kibbutz, the border, and the Syrians that were fighting on the other side. And you could see the smoke clouds, you could hear the explosions. We felt the vibration in the kibbutz, and life continued.
It's right here on the border that things become real. Every day, the United Nations observes the activity in neighboring Syria from this very spot, a sobering reminder of how serious this conflict has become.
This right here is the border between Israel and Syria. What has been happening in Syria the past 9 years?
So till then, we're talking about the quietest border we had in Israel.
Okay.
There wasn't much of a fence here. Something rusty is the same that circled my kibbutz, and we could even talk with the Syrian shepherds on the other side. And the situation radically changed. It changed in March 2011 when the civil war began by a kid that started to spray graffiti on the walls of a city called Daraa, an hour-and-a-half drive from here, writing Yalla Arrahal ya Bashar, get out of here Bashar, something that you don't say against your president, Bashar al-Assad, in a country like Syria if you want to stay alive. They killed him a few days after. That body returned to the parents in the worst condition you can imagine. It seems like that was the straw that broke the camel back. And from that point, we started to see people struggling, protesting all over the country. The Syrian president, which is part of a minority that live in the country, which most of it Muslim Sunnis, decided to use his army for shooting the protesters. Many of them defected and formed the Free Syrian Army, which was the first militia of rebels. Gradually, those guys gained more land, considered as a threat on the army, which they were part of several months before. And that's when Bashar al-Assad decided to use his Shiite friends, Iran. He couldn't trust his army, so he brought the Iranians.
So he had to bring an outside force in to be able to shore up his power and to be able to retain power, basically, in Syria.
Stay in power.
Yeah.
And part of it in order to protect himself, to get many Shiites from all over in order to do what we call in Israel exporting the revolution. We saw change of balance, the religious balance in the Middle East between the Sunnah, which is 85% of the Islam, to the Shia. The Shia that considered as 12% of the Islam was depressed by the Sunnah since the 7th century. And here in 1979, with the Islamic Revolution in Iran, it changed. And in every place there are Shiites, they started to pressure for a change. What gives them the confidence of becoming an empire is the nuclear capability. Once we're talking about Iran as a country that every Friday when they go to the mosque talk about the extinction of Israel, so obviously Israel has the motivation to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear state.
I've decided to end my trip at Mount Bental, a stronghold in the Golan Heights. This territory was taken during the Six-Day War in 1967. The sound of artillery fire from neighboring Syria is a common sound heard from this hilltop.
I'm sitting here, in the midst of barbed wire. It just seems so unnatural. Just all of the beautiful places that we've seen, the beautiful land, and it doesn't seem like it fits. We started in the south on Israel's southern borders, and in most cases, Israel and her neighbors in the south have been able to find some sort of peace, and in many cases have been able to even share in each other's beauty. But we come up north and we find a completely different situation with what's happening here in Syria, which is right behind me, with the devastating Syrian civil war that's been taking place, and also in Lebanon, which is not too far. So we come here with really a hope and a prayer that someday countries up here in the north can live side by side in harmony.